My name's Evan, I'm 29, and I've spent most of my life being the extra in my own family. Not quite invisible, just conveniently overlooked. You know the type, the kid who wasn't loud enough, funny enough, or flashy enough to compete with the real personalities in the room. Growing up, it was always my cousins who got the attention, the applause, the front row seats at family events. Me? I was the designated helper, the one tasked with taking group photos but never actually being in them. So when my cousin Emily announced her engagement and invited the entire family to a fancy dinner to celebrate, I honestly didn't expect much. I figured I'd be seated somewhere in the back, smile politely, clap at the speeches, and maybe even sneak out early if I could. But what actually happened? That was something else entirely. The dinner was at this upscale Italian place downtown. White tablecloths, chandeliers that looked like they cost more than my car, and servers who corrected your pronunciation of gnocchi with a smile. I showed up 15 minutes early because, well, punctuality is the one thing you can control when respect isn't on the menu. I wore my best blazer, freshly ironed shirt, and the watch I bought myself after landing my first promotion. I walked in expecting to see a few familiar faces, maybe get a nod from someone, but the moment I stepped into that private dining room, I knew I was out of place. My Aunt Karen, yes, her actual name, and yes, she lives up to it, was standing near the head of the table, sipping a drink and directing the seating arrangement like it was the royal wedding. Her eyes scanned the room like a security camera on a power trip. When she saw me, she gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Evan," she said, holding her wine glass in one hand and gesturing vaguely toward the back of the room with the other. "We weren't sure you'd show." "Of course," I said, trying to keep things cordial. "Wouldn't miss it." She didn't reply, just tilted her head and turned back to a cluster of relatives talking about how magical Emily's engagement shoot had been. I made my way around the long dining table, scanning for my name card. I saw rows of neatly printed place cards. Ashley, Tyler, Uncle Ron, Cousin Nate +1. But no Evan. After a few minutes of awkward pacing, I walked back toward the front to ask where I was supposed to sit. That's when Aunt Karen smirked, sipped her drink, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Sorry, that seat's reserved for actual family." She nodded toward the far corner of the room, near the coat rack and the swinging door to the kitchen, where a single folding chair sat awkwardly next to a utility table covered in silverware trays and ice buckets. I felt my ears burn. A few people looked over, chuckled uncomfortably, then quickly looked away like they didn't want to get involved. I walked over in silence, my shoes echoing louder than they should have. I sat down, folded my hands in my lap, and stared at the centerpieces I could barely see from where I was placed. The smell of bleach and garlic hung in the air. The kitchen door swung open every few seconds, sending blasts of hot steam over my shoulder. I counted 7 separate trays of coats tossed onto the rack beside me. And for the next 20 minutes, not a single person spoke to me. I wish I could say this was the first time something like this happened. It wasn't. But it was the first time it felt so intentional, so performative, like they wanted me to feel small, like my presence was a courtesy they regretted extending. I watched them laugh, toast, clink their glasses, and take photos I was clearly excluded from. The server brought out appetizers and a pesto platters, little toast with fig jam, arancini, so perfect they could have been in a magazine. None of it came my way. I got a small breadbasket that was clearly left over from another table. The butter was still frozen solid. I checked my phone a few times, half hoping someone might have texted me to say they noticed what was happening. Nothing. No messages. No missed calls. Just a low battery, warning, and a blurry front-facing camera shot of me looking like I'd wandered into the wrong event. Eventually, dinner was served. The room filled with the clatter of plates and silverware, and still no one glanced my way. Even the servers hesitated when they passed me, like I wasn't officially part of the party. And then came the moment that snapped everything into sharp focus. The final course, some overpriced dessert involving tiramisu and edible gold flakes, had just been cleared when a man in a blazer, likely the manager, walked in with a polished leather folder in hand. He looked around for a second, then made a beeline toward me. He stopped in front of my chair, opened the folder, and placed the check on the small metal table beside me. I glanced at it. $2,723. Gratuity included. I blinked. Looked up. "Sorry," I said. "I think you've got the wrong person." "No," he said smoothly. "I was told you'd be handling the bill." A woman with a silver necklace and blonde hair said it was already discussed. I didn't need to look across the room to know who that was. My Aunt Karen had stood up and was now watching me with the kind of smug satisfaction you'd expect from someone who just won a petty war they'd been planning for years. I looked around the table. Not a single person made eye contact. Not Emily. Not my uncle. Not even my own mother, who was seated toward the end and quietly dabbing her lips with a napkin like nothing had happened. I could feel my heart pounding, but it wasn't from panic. It was something colder, sharper. Like all the times I'd been stepped on or overlooked had suddenly coagulated into this one crystal-clear moment of clarity. I took a deep breath, stood up slowly, reached for my jacket, and pulled it over my shoulders. Then I smiled. Not a fake smile. Not a keep the peace smile. Just a simple, calm, I finally see you for what you are smile. I looked the manager in the eye and said, "Good luck," then turned on my heel and walked straight out of the room. And just as the door swung shut behind me, leaving the stunned silence of that private dining room behind, I heard the first voice break the tension with a frantic, "Wait, what?" The cold air outside hit my face like a slap, and honestly, it felt refreshing. I didn't look back. Not once. I just kept walking down the marble steps, past the valet who barely glanced at me, and out into the parking lot. My car was parked a block away. Standard family protocol. Always leave the good spots for the important guests. But that walk, that was the lightest my feet had ever felt. Inside, though, I was on fire. Not with rage. I wasn't boiling or storming out in a huff. It was something much more dangerous than that. I was calm, clear-headed, and done. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I felt a kind of power I didn't even know I had. The power to leave. I sat in my car for a while, just staring at the steering wheel, processing it all. My phone buzzed. One message. From Emily. "Hey, where'd you go?" I didn't respond. A second later, another message popped in. "I think there's been a mix-up about the bill. Can you come back?" Now that made me laugh. A mix-up? Right. Like it wasn't a setup from the start. Like I didn't see Aunt Karen whisper something to the manager 5 minutes before the check arrived. Like I hadn't been treated like luggage at a family reunion. A third message came in, this one from my mother. "Evan, come back. Don't make a scene." Ah, the classic. Don't make a scene. As if I had been the one turning the family tree into a dumpster fire. As if I had chosen to treat someone like they were barely worth the chair they sat on. And just like that, I realized I wasn't angry at the silence from my relatives. I was angry at myself for putting up with it for this long. For excusing it. For calling it just how things are. I started the engine. The next day, the messages kept rolling in. First, it was the passive-aggressive ones. We all chipped in and covered the bill since someone bailed. You could have said something instead of walking out like that. This is why people treat you like this, Evan. You're always so sensitive. Then came the guilt tripping. You embarrassed Emily on her special night. Your aunt was just joking. Can't you take a joke? We were trying to include you. You just don't really fit in with the vibe. The vibe. That word stuck with me like a splinter. That's what I was to them. An aesthetic mismatch. Not family. Not one of us. Just the quiet, awkward cousin who they trotted out when they needed a tech favor or help moving furniture, but who wasn't welcome in their glossy, filtered, Instagram-ready version of what family should look like. But they had a point. I didn't fit in. I didn't laugh at the mean jokes. I didn't fake smile through disrespect. I didn't pretend it was okay when people said things like, "You'll never understand," "You don't have a real career," or, "Well, at least Tyler makes something of himself." Maybe I was too quiet. Maybe I was too forgiving. But I wasn't too stupid. Not anymore. The real tipping point came 2 days later. I was sitting in my apartment, working late on a project for a client. Because, yes, I do have a real career, even if it doesn't come with a nameplate or a corner office, when my phone buzzed with a call from my Uncle Ron. I stared at the screen. He never called me. Not unless his computer crashed or he needed help recovering a password. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, another call. This time from Aunt Karen. Decline. Then another. Then another. Curiosity got the better of me, so I finally answered the next call. "Emily." "Evan," she breathed, clearly stressed. "Can you please talk to the venue? They won't let us finish the deposit without confirmation from the cardholder." I blinked. "What cardholder?" She hesitated. "Well, Aunt Karen put the reservation under your name when she made the group booking. She said it was easier because you had that freelancer card, or whatever." I sat back in my chair, silent, processing. "You're telling me she used my name and card to book a venue without telling me? And expected me to just show up and pay?" "It wasn't like that," Emily said quickly. She said you'd agreed, that you wanted to do something nice for me. I rubbed my temple. Emily, I've been ignored, insulted, shoved to the back of the room, and stuck with a $2,700 check. And now I find out that legally, I'm the one on the hook for your entire engagement dinner. She said she'd transfer you the money afterward, she snapped. You're being so dramatic. Right, I said flatly. Because nothing screams respect like putting someone on the financial line without consent. There was a pause on the line. Then Emily said something that made every muscle in my jaw tighten. Well, if you weren't so touchy, maybe people would actually treat you better. Click. I hung up. No rage. No yelling. Just a quiet, icy certainty. This wasn't just family dysfunction. This was calculated disrespect wrapped in fake smiles and wine glasses. And it was time I stopped being their silent punching bag. That night, I went through every single automatic payment I'd been helping with over the years. My mom's cell phone plan, gone. My uncle's Netflix account, logged out. The Disney Plus subscription that all the cousins had been using under my name, canceled. I checked my old Venmo records and realized I'd covered dozens of Uber rides, dinners, and birthday gifts that no one had ever reimbursed me for. Fine, let them start remembering the cost of things. But the real move? That came with the venue. Because, see, I hadn't given them a card. Aunt Karen had given them my name, assuming they could pressure me into covering it. But I called the venue directly, explained the situation, and they confirmed what I suspected. No payment had been processed yet. Just a placeholder authorization. All I had to do was say the word, and the entire thing would be dropped. So I did. And 20 minutes later, the manager sent me a polite confirmation email, saying the reservation was canceled due to lack of payment authorization, and that any future bookings would require upfront deposits from a verified cardholder. The group chat that had been silent for hours suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree on fire. At first, it was confusion. Aunt Karen texted, "Did the venue cancel? Why? I'm on hold with them now, and they're saying the booking's voided." Emily texted, "What is going on? That place was supposed to be for the bridal shower. Do you know how long it took me to get that reservation?" Then came the shift. Confusion gave way to blame. Tyler, my cousin, the self-appointed family leader, texted, "Evan, seriously? Are you trying to sabotage your own cousin's wedding now?" Mom texted, "Can we all just calm down?" Maybe Evan had a reason. "I'm sure this is all just a misunderstanding." Aunt Karen texted, "Oh, please. He's been sulking since the dinner. This is revenge, plain and simple." I didn't say a word. I let them spiral. It was oddly cathartic watching them unravel without my input for once. But the real fun didn't start until Aunt Karen called me directly. No text. No voicemail. Just a FaceTime call at 11:42 p.m. I stared at the screen as her name flashed, then let it ring out. A few seconds later, she tried again. And again. And again. On the fifth try, I picked up. Her face was red. Not angry red. Panicked red. She was pacing in what looked like her kitchen, one hand holding the phone at an unflattering angle, the other clenched in a fist by her side. "You're being childish," she snapped before I could even say hello. I tilted my head. "Good evening to you too. I'm serious, Evan. This stunt with the venue? You've put us all in a very difficult position." "You put yourselves there," I said calmly. "You used my name without my permission. You assumed I'd just pay for it like I always do. Why would you think that was okay?" She scoffed. "Because that's what family does. You're not married. You don't have kids. You're doing fine financially. What's a few $1,000s for you?" I laughed, dry and bitter. "You know, that might be the most honest thing you've said to me in years." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, "you don't see me as family. You see me as an ATM that occasionally shows up in person. And now that I finally said no, you're scrambling because you don't know how to deal with someone who has boundaries." "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she hissed. "You're blowing this out of proportion. You're not some martyr, Evan. You're just mad you didn't get to play victim this time." "Victim?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You sat me by a coat rack and gave my seat to Tyler's +1, then stuck me with the bill and expected me to be grateful. And now you're mad I finally decided not to fund your fantasy of being the hostess with the mostest. You really think I'm the one with the problem?" Her eyes narrowed. "Emily's crying. You ruined her week. And you know what? I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are." "I think," I said, smiling coolly, "they already do. That's the problem, isn't it?" Then I ended the call. I went to bed feeling lighter than I had in years. The fallout came fast. By morning, I'd been removed from the group chat entirely. Not even a goodbye, just gone. I wasn't surprised. That chat had mostly been a way for everyone to show off their kids' birthdays and humble brag about vacations anyway. No real communication ever happened there. Just filtered perfection and the occasional, "Evan, can you Venmo for this?" But I didn't stay in the dark for long. My cousin Ashley, who'd always been a little less plastic than the rest, texted me privately. "Hey, I saw what happened. That was insane. I just want you to know I would have walked out too." I stared at the message for a long time. Then another came in. "Karen's telling everyone you went nuclear because you weren't the center of attention. Just so you know, no one's buying it." And another. Also random, but I think you're about to get an invoice. She's trying to stick you with some cancellation fees. Can they even do that? I didn't reply. Not yet. I had something better in mind. I dug out the email I'd received from the venue manager. It included a digital trail, the original booking email from Karen's address, using my name but her contact info. It was all the evidence I needed. I forwarded it, along with a short explanation, to my bank's fraud protection team. If she tried to push an invoice my way, she'd have to explain why she used my identity to make the booking in the first place. But I wasn't done yet. I remembered something else, something small, but satisfying. That group dinner? It had been tagged all over Facebook and Instagram. I opened one of the posts. A photo of everyone smiling at the table, glasses raised, gold lighting glowing off their hair. In the caption, "Family means everything, #blessed, #Emily and Ben." I clicked the report button. Tag includes misrepresented identity or impersonation. Event attendee falsely named in photo. Content includes harassment or exclusion. Petty? Maybe. But so was seating someone next to a coat rack and expecting them to pay for your golden tiramisu. As I sat back, sipping my coffee, I realized something important. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about refusing to be complicit anymore. About finally standing up, not to scream or fight, but to simply walk away. But of course, they weren't going to let me go that easily. That afternoon, I got a knock at my door. It was Uncle Ron, and he wasn't smiling. I stood there for a second, just staring at the door. I hadn't seen Uncle Ron in person for what? Over a year? The last time was at my cousin Nate's baby shower, where Ron had made a joke about how some people contribute grandkids, and some people just contribute cash. He said it with a laugh, but I remember how his eyes never once left mine. Now he was standing on my doorstep, looking tired, like someone had dragged him into something he didn't want to be part of. He wore a windbreaker over a button-down shirt, like he couldn't decide if he was going for a confrontation or a casual Sunday visit. I opened the door halfway. "Ron," I said, not moving to invite him in. "Evan," he replied, shifting from one foot to the other. "You got a minute?" "Not really," I said, folding my arms. He exhaled through his nose. "Look, I'm not here to fight. Karen's, well, you know how she gets." I raised an eyebrow. "No, Ron. Why don't you enlighten me?" He winced slightly. "All right, fair enough. I thought maybe I could talk to you. You know, smooth things over." I leaned against the doorframe. "Smooth what over? The part where your wife used my name without my consent? Or the part where she humiliated me in front of the whole family and expected me to foot the bill?" Ron scratched the back of his neck. "She thought you wouldn't mind." I laughed, short, sharp. "That's not an excuse. That's an assumption built on years of you all treating me like a doormat." "Evan," he said, his voice softening. "You've always been the calm one. The one who didn't stir the pot. That's why Karen thought you'd understand. She didn't mean to hurt you. Tell me," I said, stepping forward slightly. "When's the last time you, or anyone, actually checked if I was okay with how I've been treated? When's the last time someone in the family reached out just to see how I was doing, without needing a favor, or money, or tech help?" He didn't answer. "Exactly," I said. He sighed and looked at the floor. "You're right." The admission caught me off guard. "I told her she crossed a line," he said. "She won't admit it, not to you, but she knows. And Emily, she's heartbroken. Thinks you hate her now." I crossed my arms tighter. "I don't hate Emily. But she stood by and let it happen. That's almost worse." "I know," he nodded. "Look, I'm not here to convince you to come back into the fold. I get it. But Karen's been talking about hiring a lawyer, trying to say you canceled the reservation maliciously, that you owe her for lost deposits." My jaw tightened. "She's bluffing." "Maybe," Ron said. "But she's also stubborn and vindictive. I figured you should know." I looked him in the eye. If she tries to take it legal, I've already got documentation. Emails, timestamps, call logs. She impersonated me on an official booking. Any decent lawyer would laugh her out of the room. He nodded slowly. Then I guess you're ready. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. We stood in silence for a few seconds. All right, Ron said finally. I'll tell her you're not backing down. I gave a single nod. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Evan, you were always the one I respected most. And then he left. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt heavy, but clean. In the following days, Karen tried. Oh, she tried. She sent one of those per my last email messages that looked like it had been drafted by a corporate HR bot. She claimed damages, emotional distress, and the loss of important family memories. She CC'd Emily. She hinted that someone might be compelled to seek reimbursement if I didn't resolve the situation promptly. I forwarded the entire chain to my lawyer friend, Caleb, who owed me a favor after I helped him recover a corrupted hard drive last year. He wrote back in all caps, "Do not worry about this." Karen never sent another email. The family kept their distance. I didn't get invited to Emily's bridal shower. I didn't get a save the date for the wedding. I didn't even get a happy birthday text that year. But you know what? I was okay. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just in the family. I was free from it. The version of family that had existed in that orbit, it wasn't about love or connection. It was about image, control, favor trading, and silent resentment, and don't make a scene. Once I stopped participating, it all lost power. A few months later, I threw a dinner party. Nothing big, just 6 friends who had become more like family than my actual blood. I cooked lasagna from scratch, made garlic knots, poured wine, and we sat around a table laughing so loudly the neighbors knocked once just to tell us they could hear our vibes from the hallway. After dessert, someone raised a glass and toasted me. To Evan, they said, for finally choosing peace. And as I looked around the table, I realized they were right. Peace didn't come from forcing a seat at someone else's table. It came from building your own. That same night, I posted something simple on social media. Just one photo of our table, all smiles and candles and crumbs from second helpings. The caption read, "Sometimes, family isn't who shares your name. It's who shares your laughter." A week later, Ashley liked the post. Then she messaged me again. "You were right. I'm sorry for not saying more before. Mind if I come by next time?" I smiled and typed, "Of course. Just bring dessert." And that was that. No dramatic reunions. No epic apologies. Just a new chapter written on my own terms. I didn't need to burn the bridge. I just needed to stop walking back across it.